It was an ordinary day, like any other at the hospital. The morning was quiet, the buzz of the emergency room humming in the background as patients came and went, and nurses like me moved between rooms, performing routine checks and offering comfort. Nothing was out of the ordinary. Until he walked in. I never imagined that my life would change because of a simple routine checkup. But on that day, in that sterile room, everything changed. The moment I saw him, the air shifted, and the world felt different. My heart raced for reasons I couldn't explain. It was as if time slowed down, and for a second, I forgot where I was. I have always prided myself on being professional, a nurse who could separate her emotions from the job. But that day, something within me shifted, and I couldn't pretend it didn't affect me. I had no idea what it would lead to, but I could feel the pull between us the moment I laid eyes on him. I was a 32-year-old nurse, dedicated to my work and loyal to the boundaries of professionalism. My job was to heal, to care, and to help those in need. But in the quiet of that room, with only the sound of the heart monitor and my own breath filling the air, I realized that even the strongest of us could falter when faced with something we didn't understand. The patient was in his mid-30s. Tall. Athletic. His dark brown eyes seemed to study everything and everyone around him with a kind of quiet confidence. But there was something more. Something that went beyond his appearance. There was an intensity about him that left me feeling exposed. Vulnerable, even. "Hi, I'm Alex," he said when I walked into the room. He gave me a nod, his voice smooth but laced with a subtle edge of hesitation, like he was unsure of how to interact with the nurse who was about to help him. I nodded back, my professional mask firmly in place. "Nice to meet you, Alex. I'll just take your vitals, and we'll get started," I replied, already reaching for my clipboard and the thermometer. I tried to focus on the task at hand, keeping my eyes on the medical equipment. I couldn't afford to look at him too long. But every time I did, it was like he was pulling me in. He sat on the exam table, his muscles flexing beneath his shirt. The way he carried himself, the way he sat there as if he owned the room, it was magnetic. His broad shoulders, the strength that seemed to emanate from his every movement, everything about him made me feel both excited and unsettled. He didn't speak much, which I appreciated. But there was something in the way he glanced at me, something that made the air around us thick with unspoken words. When it was time for him to disrobe for the procedure, I turned around to give him privacy. It wasn't much of a request, just a quick checkup after all, but the very act of him undressing felt different than any other patient I'd ever worked with. There was an intimacy in the room now, a tension that I couldn't ignore, even though my job had always been to make my patients feel comfortable and safe. I didn't know why, but when I turned back around, I couldn't help but notice the way he looked, exposed, yet confident. There was no sign of embarrassment, no awkwardness. He stood tall, looking me in the eye as if he knew exactly what was going through my mind. At that moment, the professional boundaries I'd always clung to began to slip away. The nurse inside me screamed that I had to stay focused, that I had to remain composed. But the woman inside me, the woman who had spent years suppressing any kind of emotional reaction, couldn't stop herself from feeling drawn to him. I tried to focus on the procedure at hand, the task I was there to do. I took his vitals, measured his blood pressure, all the while trying to push the thoughts from my mind. But it wasn't easy. I couldn't get past the way his presence seemed to fill the room, the way his gaze never left mine. His deep brown eyes seemed to pierce through my professional facade, making me feel exposed in a way I never expected. There was a moment, just a brief moment, when our eyes locked. I swear, time stood still. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt a flush spread across my face. In that moment, I realized something I wasn't ready to admit. I had never been in this position before, not in my entire career. I had seen patients in various stages of discomfort, from those who were embarrassed by their illnesses to those who had no qualms at all. But with Alex, it was different. His calm confidence had a strange effect on me. His very presence seemed to undo the years of training I had to keep emotions at bay. I found myself wondering what it would be like to give in to the attraction that was building between us. What it would be like to act on the undeniable chemistry that crackled in the space between us. But no, I told myself. I couldn't. I couldn't risk everything I had worked for. I had always stayed within the lines, never allowing myself to step beyond the boundaries. I had always known that the job came first, that my role as a nurse required me to be professional, to be detached. But this felt different. It wasn't just about the job anymore. It was about something deeper, something far more complicated. And that was the moment when everything changed. That brief interaction, that look between us, the moment I saw him, truly saw him, would stay with me. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew one thing for sure, I couldn't forget it. Thank you for being here, for listening to my story. Your support, your comments, your encouragement mean the world to me. It gives me the strength to keep going and continue sharing the truth of this journey. I know it's not easy to understand, but sometimes, the hardest stories to tell are the ones we need to share the most. Stay with me as I continue this journey, and let's face what happens next together. The days that followed that encounter felt like I was walking through fog, as if the world had tilted just slightly off its axis. Everything seemed normal, but nothing felt the same anymore. I couldn't shake the memory of him, his gaze, his presence, that brief moment when our eyes locked, and everything I had known to be professional suddenly crumbled beneath me. I tried to focus on work, I really did. The hospital had a rhythm, a routine, and I had always prided myself on being able to go through the motions with precision, without losing myself to the chaos. But with Alex, it was different. I found myself distracted, my mind drifting back to that room, to the way he looked at me, to the way his body had filled the space in the sterile exam room. My emotions were a whirlwind, a mixture of confusion, guilt, and longing. I had spent years cultivating a sense of detachment. In my line of work, it was necessary. You couldn't afford to get too attached to the patients, emotions made you weak, and weakness in a nurse was something you could not afford. But now, every time I walked into a room, I couldn't help but think about him. What would it be like to give in? What would it feel like to break all those boundaries I had built? There was a moment of clarity during one of my shifts a few days later when I realized I had been avoiding him. He had returned to the hospital for another appointment, but I deliberately worked in other departments, anything to avoid that room, to avoid being near him. I told myself it was because I didn't want to risk my professionalism. But deep down, I knew the truth, I was scared. Scared of the pull I felt towards him, scared of the unspoken tension that seemed to linger between us. I remember the moment I finally couldn't avoid it any longer. I was walking down the corridor when I heard someone call my name. It was Alex. He was standing by the nurse's station, his eyes locking with mine as soon as I looked up. He was smiling, his easy confidence making my heart race for reasons I couldn't explain. "Hey," he said, his voice warm and inviting. "I was hoping I'd run into you." I smiled back, though I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "Hi, Alex. How are you feeling today?" "I'm good, just wanted to see if I could get a moment of your time," he said, his tone casual, but his eyes betrayed a certain intensity that made my breath catch. There was something different about him today, something more deliberate in the way he spoke, in the way he stood. I couldn't tell if it was my imagination, but there was a tension in the air between us, thick and undeniable. "Sure," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's on your mind?" He paused for a moment, as if deciding how to approach the next part of the conversation. Finally, he spoke, his words quiet, but full of meaning. "I wanted to talk about, the other day," he said, and my heart skipped a beat. I immediately felt a flush creep up my neck. I'm not sure what you mean," I stammered, even though I knew exactly what he was talking about. "You know," he continued, "the way things were between us in that room." His eyes never left mine, and for the first time since that moment, I felt as if he understood exactly what I was feeling, exactly how that brief exchange had impacted both of us. I opened my mouth to respond, to say something professional, something that would push away the thoughts racing through my mind, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, all I could do was stand there, caught between my duty as a nurse and the overpowering attraction that was now impossible to ignore. Alex took a small step closer to me, and my breath caught in my throat. The space between us felt like it was closing, but I couldn't move. I couldn't take a step back, even though every part of me told me to. I don't want to make things weird, he said softly, but I can't stop thinking about it. Alex, we can't, I interrupted, trying to keep my voice calm, though my heart was pounding in my chest. I can't cross those boundaries. It's not right. We have to keep things professional. I could see the frustration flicker across his face, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned in just slightly, as if testing the waters. I know, he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. But can't we just admit that there's something between us? Something that neither of us can ignore? The words hung in the air like a challenge, and I felt the weight of them settle into my chest. He was right. There was something between us, something undeniable. But I couldn't let myself give in to it. Not here. Not in this place, where my career and my integrity were at stake. Please, I said, my voice trembling with the effort to hold myself together. We can't do this. It's wrong. He didn't push further. Instead, he just nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving mine. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt heavy, filled with the words we both wanted to say but couldn't. Finally, he stepped back, breaking the tension that had filled the space between us. I get it, he said quietly, his tone softer now. I just wanted to be honest with you. I nodded, relieved but still overwhelmed by the emotions stirring inside me. Thank you, I whispered, unsure of what else to say. As he walked away, I couldn't help but watch him go, my heart still pounding in my chest. The encounter had left me shaken, but there was a part of me, one that I couldn't deny, that felt relieved. But deep down, I knew that things couldn't stay this way forever. We had crossed a line, whether we wanted to admit it or not. The unspoken tension, the attraction, the pull between us, it wasn't going to go away. And that scared me more than I wanted to admit. It's hard to pinpoint exactly when things started to spiral out of control. Maybe it was that moment when Alex and I exchanged those unspoken words in the hallway, or maybe it was the quiet moments after, when I found myself replaying every interaction, every glance, and every touch. I thought I could keep my distance, that I could go back to my normal life, to my routine, and leave that moment behind. But I was wrong. It haunted me. The days after that encounter were both the same and entirely different. I went through the motions, tending to my patients with a professionalism that now felt distant and hollow. Every time I moved through the hospital, I would catch glimpses of Alex, his figure in the hallway, his voice over the intercom, and most of all, his eyes whenever we crossed paths. I couldn't escape it. I should have kept my distance. I should have stayed professional. I knew that. But the more I tried to push him out of my mind, the more I felt pulled towards him. It was like an invisible thread that tethered me to him, a thread I couldn't break, no matter how hard I tried. I saw him again a few days later. He was back for another follow-up, and for the first time since our conversation in the hallway, we were alone in the room together. As soon as he walked in, I felt that same electricity that had surged between us the first time. My heart raced, my breath caught in my throat, but I pushed the emotions aside, focusing on my work. Hi, he said, his voice soft but deliberate. His smile was casual, but there was something deeper in his gaze, something that made my knees weak. How's your day going? It's fine, I replied, trying to sound composed. Let's get you checked out, then you're free to go. I kept my eyes on the clipboard, focusing on the numbers, the medical charts, anything that would ground me. But the moment I took his blood pressure, I felt his eyes on me. It wasn't just a look, it was a pull, an undeniable force that made everything else seem insignificant. The soft touch of his hand brushing mine as I adjusted the cuffs sent a jolt of heat straight through me. I stepped back quickly, trying to regain control. Sorry, I muttered. I just need to finish this. No worries, he said, his voice low. I could tell he was holding back, but I could feel the intensity of his gaze. I get it. I knew that this was dangerous. I knew that this couldn't happen. But my heart was telling me something else. It was telling me that I didn't want to walk away from this. That I didn't want to pretend like nothing was happening. I finished the examination in record time, not because it was necessary, but because I was running from something I wasn't ready to face. When I gave him the all clear to leave, there was a long silence. It was like neither of us knew what to say. Alex, I began, my voice shaky. We can't keep doing this. He tilted his head, his expression serious but understanding. Doing what? This thing between us, I said, my words stumbling over each other. It's not right. You're my patient, and I'm your nurse. Nothing can happen. I know, he replied softly, his voice a mixture of frustration and something else, something I couldn't place. But that doesn't change how I feel. It doesn't change how you feel either. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. It was true. I had felt something for him, something undeniable. And yet, I had tried to ignore it, tried to bury it beneath layers of professionalism and reason. But I couldn't anymore. The more I tried to push it down, the stronger it pushed back. I shouldn't have said that, Alex said, stepping closer to me, his voice low. But I need you to know, there's something between us. I'm not asking you to act on it, but I can't keep pretending like it doesn't exist. I took a step back, my mind racing, my heart thundering in my chest. This is wrong, I whispered. We can't do this. Alex didn't say anything for a moment. He just stood there, looking at me, his eyes intense. And then, he did something I never expected. He reached out, gently taking my hand in his. I don't want to make this harder for you, he said softly. But I don't think I can walk away from this. From you. And in that moment, I realized that neither of us could walk away. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. I could feel the walls I had spent so long building around myself begin to crumble. I knew it was dangerous, that it could cost me my job, my reputation, maybe even my future in this profession. But I also knew that I couldn't deny what was happening between us anymore. Without thinking, I took a step forward, closing the distance between us. My breath caught in my throat as I felt the heat of his body, the intensity of his gaze. Everything in me screamed to stop, to pull away. But I couldn't. Not anymore. The moment our lips touched, I knew that there was no going back. It was the beginning of something that would change both of our lives forever. It was everything I had told myself I would never do, everything I had fought so hard to keep out of my life. But in that moment, it didn't matter. Nothing mattered except the way his kiss made me feel, alive, consumed, and utterly powerless. We pulled away slowly, our breaths shallow, our hearts racing. I felt a mix of guilt, excitement, and fear. But mostly, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, a connection, something real. Something that I couldn't ignore anymore. I'm sorry, I whispered, even though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. Alex just shook his head, his eyes soft. Don't apologize, he said. We're both in this together. I didn't know what to say after that. I didn't know where we went from here, or what would happen next. But I knew one thing for sure, things would never be the same again. Thank you for being with me throughout this story. Your support, your comments, and your encouragement mean everything to me. This has been a difficult journey to share, but I know it's the truth that will set me free.